If you're staring at a pool maintenance bill and wondering whether you can finally ditch those bulky chlorine tablets for something that just works, you're not alone. Most homeowners I've spoken with say the same thing. They want a system that's reliable enough to run day after day, easy enough that they don't have to become electricians, and cheap enough that the savings actually show up on their monthly budget. The risk, of course, is that you spend a few $100s on a fancy piece of equipment that ends up being a headache, or worse, a money sink because it never really replaces the chemicals you were hoping to eliminate. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. That's why I spent a few weeks digging through the specs, watching installation videos, and reading the handful of reviews that actually exist for the CircuPool CORE55 salt chlorine generator. It's marketed as the easiest, cutting-edge salt chlorinator for pools up to 55,000 gallons, and on paper that sounds like a perfect fit for a mid-size residential pool. The real question is whether the promises line up with the day-to-day experience of a homeowner who just wants crystal clear water without the ritual of measuring chemicals every weekend. First, let's talk about who this unit is really built for. If you have a pool in the 30 to 50 gallon range, you probably already have a basic chlorine feeder or you're comfortable handling chlorine granules. The CORE55 starts to make sense when you're looking at a larger body of water. Think a backyard oasis with a spa attached, or a community pool that sees heavy use. The titanium cell can churn out up to 2 pounds of chlorine per day, which is more than enough to keep a 55,000 gallon pool sanitized even on hot summer weekends when the sun is doing its best to break down chlorine. If you're a homeowner who loves to swim year-round and hates the idea of buying chlorine bags every month, this is the kind of system that will actually replace that recurring expense. On the flip side, if you're a seasonal swimmer with a small above-ground pool, the CORE55 is overkill. The unit's price point and the need for a dedicated salt mixing process make it less attractive for occasional use. You'd likely spend more on the generator than you'd ever save on chlorine, and the installation, while marketed as no complicated wiring, still requires a bit of plumbing know-how. So if you're looking for a plug-and-play solution for a dipin pool that you only use a few weeks a year, you might want to skip this one and stick with a simple chlorine floater. Now, let's get into the practical strengths that actually matter once the box is out of the garage. The first thing I noticed in the installation videos is the compact all-in-one housing. Traditional salt chlorinators can be a tangle of separate control boxes, cells, and mounting brackets, which often means you need a second person to help you bolt everything together. The CORE55's design folds the electronics, power supply, and the titanium cell into a single weatherproof shell that fits neatly against a pool skimmer or in a utility closet. The IP66 rating means it can handle rain, snow, and even the occasional splash from a rogue pool toy without rusting or short-circuiting. For anyone who lives in a climate with harsh winters, that durability translates into one less thing to worry about during the off-season. The smart sensors are another highlight that isn't just a marketing buzzword. The unit continuously measures water flow, salinity, and temperature, then automatically adjusts the chlorine output. In practice, this means you set your desired salt level once, usually around 2,500 to 3,000 ppm for most residential pools, and the system keeps the chlorine production in line with the actual conditions. I've seen a couple of homeowners report that after the first week of operation, their water test strips read a stable chlorine range without any manual tweaks. That kind of set-it-and-forget-it behavior is a real time saver, especially if you're juggling work, kids, and a garden. Of course, no product is perfect, and the CORE55 does have a few trade-offs that can bite you if you're not prepared. The first is the initial salt load. To get the generator working, you need to dissolve several hundred pounds of pool-grade salt into the water, which can be a messy job if you haven't done it before. Some users have mentioned that the salt doesn't dissolve evenly if you just dump it in the skimmer. You end up having to run the pump for a few extra hours and occasionally stir the water manually. It's not a deal-breaker, but it does add a small step to the startup routine that people often overlook when they compare just buy a chlorine feeder versus install a salt system. Another practical point is the power consumption. The titanium cell draws a modest amount of electricity, roughly 20 to 30 watts, when it's actively generating chlorine, but you'll still see a slight uptick on your electric bill during the peak summer months when the system is